Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to this May 5, 2014 edition of Nightcast. We open up tonight our first story out of the Ukraine, where 4 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and an army helicopter shot down by pro-Russian militants near the eastern city of Sloviansk, according to the Kiev. It says the gunmen used heavy weapons against Ukraine's units involved in the anti-terror operation. Casualties were also reported among the rebels. Fergal Keane has the opening report tonight from Sloviansk.
From Sloviansk, the wailing of sirens. We stopped at a deserted, barricaded bridge. The rebels here had vanished. This the hole punched by an army shell. We heard sniper fire. An unseen gunman scanning the road ahead. It had been a morning of heavy fighting. A helicopter attacking rebel positions. On the ground, a rush to deploy defenders as pro-Russian forces tried to stop the army's advance. Both sides sustained casualties. This man, a badly wounded rebel. Others, accused of being rebels by the army, captured and taken away for interrogation. We drove to Sloviansk during a pause in the fighting. Entering the city, the first checkpoints. And this the bridge into the city centre. A car, a lone cyclist cross. We're now driving in the centre of Sloviansk, and for the past half hour or so we're told by people on checkpoints it is quieter here, but fighting can break out again at any minute. In the lull, a few people emerged, some to find food, others to see who now controlled Sloviansk. But this place of 125,000 people felt desolate. Here a stolen police car carries some wounded. Now what's not at all clear, once you come in here, is quite who is winning. The army says it's taken a large part of the town, but as we drove around we found armed men from the pro-Russian side on checkpoints. They are very, very nervous. They're willing to shoot at anything that they consider suspicious. As we discovered, from behind these sandbags, an angry shout. We stopped filming. Shots were fired. It showed the extreme tension. The killing is deepening divisions. 10 miles away, in another town, we saw the funeral of 20-year-old Yulia, a nurse. She'd just got her job, her grandmother says. Her whole life had been preparing for that. Her anguished family say she was killed at a military checkpoint. Among the rebels here, the fear they might be next to be attacked. We'll stand to the last man, Oleg said. I've got 2 children. I know what I'm fighting for. But on the ground, neither side can claim to be in control. Not of territory and not of events. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Sloviansk.
And friends, with relations worsening between the Ukraine and Russia, we'll get our camera shot on here in just a moment. Here we go, I think. Yeah, there we go. With the relations worsening between Ukraine and Russia, ministries are investigating ways that European countries can become less dependent upon Russian energy sources. Jeremy Howell reports.
In the winter of 2009, people living in southeast Europe had to cut wood for fuel because Russia's Gazprom, in a quarrel with Ukraine over unpaid bills, cut off all gas supplies to Europe flowing through the country. Continuing tensions between Russia and Ukraine means a gas cut-off has again become a threat. Countries in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, take 80% or more of their gas supplies from Russia and have little in storage. The UK, however, imports no gas from Russia directly and has substantial stocks. So the immediate plan is to link up Europe's existing gas pipelines into a grid to send gas to where it's scarce in times of crisis.
Physically building this network takes time. It's not something you can do overnight. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a question of how do you share out a reduced supply pot, if you like. If one of the main supply routes from Russia goes down, you have to then ask, where's the replacement supply going to come from?
Europe needs to search beyond Russia for new suppliers, and the USA has an abundance of natural gas, thanks to the hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, of shale. But it'll be years before much of this can be delivered to Europe.
There are no gas export terminals on the United States Atlantic or Gulf coasts. They're going to need local permits for construction and all of those kinds of things. And we're not looking, I think, at a significant volume of US gas exports until, again, around 2020.
In European countries like Britain, companies have started to explore shale fields, but no one can yet tell how much gas they'll yield or when. Over the years, Europe has grown steadily more dependent on Russia for its energy. It'll need many more years to wean itself off. Jeremy Howell, BBC News.
And friends, as the situation in the Ukraine causes the East and the West tensions to be heightened and the possibility of the next round of world war to be kicked off, that and things going on in the Middle East, the interesting or probably significant point about this story is that at present, half of all Europe's gas comes from Russia, with the main pipelines passing through the Ukraine. And as you saw in this video, Ukraine governments are concerned that as tensions continue, Russia could cut off this supply. Now, our next video was a 32-second little clip showing how the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, as of news report from May 1st, today's May 5, so this was 4 days ago, what's today? Today is Monday, 4, 3, 2, 1, Thursday, last Thursday, the IMF approved a $17.1 billion bailout. That'd be a 10.1 billion pound bailout for Ukraine to help the country's beleaguered economy. You know, with the way the tensions continue to escalate, and now there's been some soldiers killed, people killed on both sides of the conflict in the Ukraine, it's strange to imagine one of the comments that the head of the IMF makes, because this loan comes amid heightened military and political tension between Ukraine and neighboring Russia. The head of the IMF, Christina Lagarde, said there would be regular checks on Ukraine's progress. Seems like a strange statement in a way, and with the situation escalating over there into more like a tremendous civil war. But here's the video on this.
Urgent action was necessary. Decisive measures were taken by Ukraine, and decisive measures have just been taken by the IMF. So there has been a very strong endorsement for the program, which will release over the course of the next 2 years $17.1 billion in different installments over the course of those 2 years.
Okay. Will that Ukraine tension stretch out as long as 2 years? We don't know. We don't know. But it sure is getting bigger over there. And things around the world, friends, here's a story that I marked in my notes as being very sad. A very sad story. Intense battle for South Sudan city of Bentiu. South Sudan troops attempting to recapture the oil-rich town of Bentiu from rebels have been forced back amid heavy gunfire. The BBC's Alistair Lighthead, who is in the UN compound on the outskirts of Bentiu, witnessed the battle. Very brave news reporter. He witnessed the battle as the soldiers retreated. Alistair Lighthead with this report.
We heard the battle from a bunker on the United Nations base. The smoke, the explosions, an impression of its intensity. But the sound told the whole story. UN troops fled the airport as government forces tried to take a town the rebels have held for 2 weeks. Well, the battle for Bentiu is still clearly going on. The government forces came past this base, got to the edge of town yesterday, and the rebels are putting up a fierce fight. Yesterday, President Salva Kiir's troops and militia fighting with them arrived in force, despite his assurance to the US Secretary of State that he was committed to a peace deal. Other rebel-held towns were also attacked, but having counted them going into Bentiu, we saw far fewer coming back.
These guys are firing at the...
After a couple of hours of intense fighting, the government troops are now retreating back past the UN base again. It seems that the rebels have forced them to come back. They haven't taken the town at all. Then the rebels emerged from the bush. South Sudan won its independence after decades fighting a guerrilla war. Tactics its divided military is now using on itself. They opened fire across the United Nations base. When the battle stopped, there were bodies in the road. Most of the 25,000 people in the camp were fine, but this 4-year-old girl was killed by a stray bullet. Another child lost. And with the government still fighting for Bentiu, many more may die unless this civil war can end. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, in Bentiu, South Sudan.
Very, very brave reporter there. Thank you, Alistair. Friends, if that story wasn't enough to help you put some heart in your prayers tonight, in the part of the prayer where we pray, Thy kingdom come, as Jesus Christ instructed us in the model prayer to be doing, this next story, which I labeled as shocking, maybe will help. Nigerian Islamist militant group Boko Haram has threatened to sell the hundreds of schoolgirls these men abducted 3 weeks ago. The militant leader appears in a video. You'll see it during this report. About 230 girls are still believed to be missing, prompting widespread criticism of the Nigerian government. Tommy Oladapo reports from Abuja.
The first confirmation of the fate of the schoolgirls abducted in Nigeria. In a video released today, the leader of the Islamist extremist group Boko Haram, standing in front of an armored car, says, "I abducted your girls." Abubakar Shekau adds, "I will sell the women in the market by Allah. There is a market for selling humans. Allah commands me to sell. I will sell women." Their grief and heartbreak has moved the world. It's been 3 tormenting weeks since the girls were reported missing, but since then the authorities have been unable to find them. The BBC has secured the first TV interviews with the mothers who are in agony, not knowing the fate of their abducted daughters.
Many people come to our house during the day to sympathize with us, but then at night our family stays awake all night, thinking of our daughter and all the other girls and what they're going through and where they're being held.
The girls were seized from this remote school in northeast Nigeria by Boko Haram. Nigeria's president has been accused of not doing enough to rescue the girls. Last night he spoke about the issue for the first time on television.
But we promise that wherever these girls are, we'll surely get them out. There's no story that any of them has been hurt in terms of injured or dead.
For a long time, many Nigerians have felt that the government's response to the Boko Haram threat has been far from effective. The president's latest comments will do little to inspire hope when the fate of more than 200 girls remains unclear. And that's why groups like this are having daily protests to express their outrage.
My daughter is not with me at the moment. My parents are helpless. We are crying at home. They should bring the girls back. It is then that will have a rest of mind and support the government in anything they do.
More than 1,500 people have been killed in northeastern Nigeria so far this year, and it's ever so clear for the government that the violence cannot be ignored. Tomi Oladipo, BBC News, Abuja.
Friends, you saw in that video how the mothers are grieving over their girls having been abducted. In this next video, the mother of 10 murdered by the IRA more than 40 years ago has said they are considering a civil action over the case. Jerry Adams was released without charge yesterday after being questioned for 4 days about the 1972 shooting. Chris Buckler reports.
The following report contains flash photography.
After days spent in custody as a potential murder suspect, Jerry Adams was free tonight to enjoy a rousing reception at a Republican rally. But the Sinn Féin president is still in the spotlight and still under scrutiny. He faces no charges in connection with Jean McConville's death, but a file has been sent to prosecutors in Northern Ireland, although he insists he had nothing to do with the killing.
The sham that I was put through in terms of the total failure, because they cannot, the total failure of the PSNI to present any evidential link between me and that awful event.
More than 40 years after she was abducted from her home by the IRA, Jean McConville's family are still grieving. The widowed mother of 10 was killed and buried in secret, and in the absence of criminal charges, one of her daughters is threatening to take a civil action against the Sinn Féin leader. A civil case would have a lower burden of proof than a criminal prosecution.
Well, at the minute we are looking into it, it's early days, but it looks like we have a strong case. We have had people approach us that are willing to back us, so it's looking good.
The police knew that arresting a high-profile politician would also put the spotlight on them. And after the many hours of interrogation, the release of Jerry Adams has led to questions for detectives about their decisions. A file is being sent to the Public Prosecution Service, but it's understood that unless significant new evidence is discovered, a charge is extremely unlikely. What's really outraged members of Sinn Féin is that their leader was arrested during an election campaign, and just a few weeks ahead of votes being held across the island of Ireland.
I don't believe that we see political policing in Northern Ireland. What I certainly see as Justice Minister is politicians from both sides trying to interfere in the justice system in different ways at different times.
The Belfast Marathon took place today. Organisers want to show a city moving forward, but in Northern Ireland the past can feel ever present, and that applies to the histories of individuals as well as this place. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Belfast.
Friends, as the EU comes together, it's becoming the place for migrants to go, much like the United States both still is in a way and really used to be. But now Europe, the idea of the EU, they want to go to Europe. And as a result of that, many migrants are dying. In today's news, at least I believe it was 22 migrants died as 2 boats capsized off the Greek island Samos. The Greek Coast Guard say 2 boats carrying migrants have capsized in the Aegean Sea. And yeah, I do have my note here. At least 22 people have drowned and another 7 are missing. Mark Lowen has this report.
It reached the shore in the end, but many of those on board didn't. The Greek Coast Guard towed it in, one of 2 migrant vessels that capsized. At least 22 people were killed. 4 of those who drowned were children. Others are still missing. 36 were rescued. It's the worst migrant disaster Greece has dealt with in months. Those pulled to safety were from Eritrea, Somalia and Syria. The boats went down near the Greek island of Samos, close to the Turkish mainland. Since the Greek government increased controls on the land border with Turkey, the islands are seeing a huge rise in migrant arrivals. The owner of a boat that helped the rescue said the vessels were 8 to 10 nautical miles from Samos when they capsized. Bodies could be seen inside one, he said. We used airbags to hold it afloat, and then I towed it to shore. Greece has long argued that it bears a huge part of the immigration burden because of its geographical position, and that stuck in a financial crisis, it can't cope. The death of over 360 migrants off the Italian island of Lampedusa last October threw migration back into the spotlight. The EU says it's increasing funds to tackle it, but southern European countries are still struggling. And the victims of these perilous waters keep growing, as long as dreams of Europe are still alive. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Athens.
Friends, we showed you a couple of videos back the story about Boko Haram, and how that group has abducted a number of girls and threatened to be selling the girls while the mothers grieve. I've got a video that goes back to the archive last April, and from April 22nd. This is a 60-second outline produced by the BBC that shows how the Boko Haram is fighting to overthrow the government and create an Islamic state. This may help some of us understand just what's going on with why are these men abducting these girls, and what's going on with the Boko Haram. The group has caused havoc in Africa's most populous country through a campaign of bombings and attacks. Now this video, 60-second video, now I won't be able to play the music with it because we don't have the license on the music. But we have the BBC license for the video, so I can play you this BBC News outline of the background, leadership, and methods of the group Boko Haram in 60 seconds. This video produced by Jasmine Coleman. Boko Haram means Western education is forbidden. Founded in 2002, the group aims to overthrow Nigeria's government, create an Islamic state. Since 2009, it has waged a campaign of gun attacks, bombings, and abductions. Thousands of people have died in the violence and subsequent security crackdown. Nigeria's government had said the violence was contained, and Abuja bus station bomb in April 2014. Boko Haram leader has appeared in online videos despite claims he was killed by the military. Boko Haram was labeled a terrorist organization by the U.S. in November 2013. Friends, I'm sorry, the microphone was off. I don't know what part we missed here. But in this next video, one of the laws of success says avoid bodily injury. Now, if you're in a show with high risk, sometimes you've got to depend on other people to help keep you protected. But maybe this is a lesson for some to stay out of extremely high risk activities, because these U.S. acrobats who were injured in a fall in Rhode Island, none of them were killed, but at least 11 people have been injured critically after a group of female acrobats fell from an aerial platform. We'll take a look at this and keep in mind, one of the laws of success, as we show you this, is avoid bodily injury. A circus spokesman said the performers were in the middle of a... Well, you'll see this. Beth McLeod has the report.
A day out that ended abruptly. These people had been watching a show by one of America's most famous circus companies. When this aerial stunt went horribly wrong. This troupe of female acrobats were hanging from their hair when the apparatus supporting them came free from the metal truss it was connected to, and they plunged around 10 metres to the ground, landing on a dancer underneath.
There were approximately between 15 and 20 people that were injured from a platform that collapsed above the stage. 9 are being treated at Rhode Island Hospital. They're in critical but expect to be non-life-threatening injuries, a lot of broken bones.
The accident happened in front of a full house.
At first we thought it was part of the show, and as soon as it hit the ground I knew that it was not.
I was worried because they fell and one guy ran off stage with a bloody head. Like, I'm thinking something hit him in the head, and 2 girls were in neck braces and 3 girls were passed out, and 1 girl was in a full body cast. It got hurt a lot.
You know, friends, I as a little boy, I often enjoyed a circus show and some of the things people do, but when they take safeguards to make sure they're protected, and, you know, one thing, friends, I have to put it this way. You know, when God takes his hand of protection off, a lot of things happen that otherwise somebody would have caught it, because some angel would have tapped them on the shoulder, let them know, hey, you need to buckle this a little tighter, or something's unsecure here. Just, you know, God for a long time has been protecting events in this country, weather and so on, and now you can see more and more he's taking his hands of protection off of us. And I know accidents do happen, and we should avoid bodily injury. Last night, I told you I would enlarge a scripture that we read. I had it printed out for you real tiny. We went through 4 scriptures, or a few more, from Ezekiel 5, verses 1, 2, 11, and 12. I went through last night. Here's verse 12. I've got it enlarged for you tonight, where we were pointing out how a prophecy that's a dual prophecy with the big fulfillment yet to come, with 1/3 of the people to die from pestilence and famine. This is explaining verse 2 and verse 1 that talks about shaving the hair from the beard. Let me go to verse 2 for just a moment. And then it says, verse 2 explains what Ezekiel was to do with the hair he shaved off his head and face, his beard and his hair. You shall burn with fire 1/3 part of that hair in the midst of the city. Then another 1/3 part he was to take and smite about with a knife, and another 1/3 part he was to scatter in the wind, and he would draw out a sword after them. And here's a better explanation of that in verse 12. A fuller explanation. The 1/3 part that he would burn in the city, they shall die with pestilence and famine. And you know, if we look at our chart, in Revelation, the 3rd seal and the 4th seal, the black horse and the pale horse, represent that famine and pestilence. And although he says it in the reverse order in this scripture, the pestilence and the famine, the 4th seal and the 3rd seal, the pale horse and the black horse, that pestilence and famine, 1/3 of the people will be killed by those 2 seals. Then another 1/3 of the populace of the earth, the people, will be killed by sword. And that's the red horse. Put our chart back up here. The 2nd seal is a red horse of war, and of course the sword. And the sword also is carried by the white horse. He's got a bow, and he rides a horse with a bow, and he associates with the red horse of war because he ties up with the military of the beast power that's to come. But then the final third, so you got 2/3, 1/3 of them killed by pestilence and famine, a second third killed by the sword, and then the latter third are scattered into all the winds, and even they have a sword drawn after them. And, excuse me, those who are taken captive, some will live through it, but a very few. Many people are going to die in captivity. But the few who live on will live on into the world tomorrow, the time when Jesus Christ has returned to this earth as the King of Kings, and he's replaced all the governments of this world with the government of God, the kingdom of God as King of Kings. And with some of you who are watching this program who've been called and invited to be among the elect who reign and rule, reign on Christ's throne with him as a fellow king, given territory to rule over, and a priest. A wonderful, exciting future. Friends, that's it. We're out of time for tonight, this Monday night. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll plan to be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.